"That necklace belongs to my mother, sir." The trembling voice of the little girl suddenly shattered the elegant and quiet atmosphere inside the mansion. Every conversation stopped at once. All eyes turned toward the small child standing at the doorway, clutching an old stuffed rabbit tightly against her chest. Across the room, the Mafia boss instinctively looked down at the thin gold chain resting on the neck of his fiancée. At first, he assumed it was nothing more than a child's mistake, but then his gaze caught on a small scratch on the oval pendant, a tiny detail he had seen countless times on the neck of the loyal housekeeper, who had served the family for 15 years before passing away just weeks ago. His heart seemed to stop. If the little girl's words were true, then someone inside this very house had been hiding a terrible secret all this time. No one moved. The dining room of the Moretti estate had known silences before, after bad news from Chicago, after a name was crossed off a list. But the silence that followed the little girl's 5 words was different. It was the silence of a room that had forgotten how to breathe. The 2 Bronx capos sat frozen. Tommaso Ricci held his glass of red at a tilt, a single drop clinging to the rim without falling. The younger, Nico Fontana, had a piece of veal on his fork halfway to his mouth. He set the fork down without lowering his eyes. He did not know where else to put them. Salvatore Grasso, the family lawyer, 67 years old, lowered his steak knife to the linen with the care of a man diffusing something. His right hand did not tremble, his left did. He folded it under the table. Roberto Genovese, who owned the shipping company that put half of the Moretti containers through Elizabeth Port, coughed once into his fist and then did not cough again. At the head of the table, Alessandro did not move. His right hand rested on the stem of a wineglass he had not touched. Between his 2 hands, the entire mass of the Moretti estate sat waiting for what he would do next. To his right, Isabella Romano sat very still. Her left hand still held her wine. Her right had risen without her deciding to raise it, and now lay flat against the pendant on her collarbone as though covering it could remove it from the room. Her chin was lifted a fraction too high, the posture of a woman who had rehearsed calm and had almost, but not quite, remembered the choreography. The grandfather clock in the corridor struck 7:12. 12 small bronze notes. It was the only sound the house was willing to make. Alessandro did not look at Isabella. He looked at the pendant, and he noticed something he had not noticed a moment before. On Rosa, the chain had always hung 1 knuckle's length lower. He had watched that pendant rest on Rosa's collarbone at the kitchen window 20,000 mornings. The oval on Isabella sat a fraction too high. Not a gift, not a purchase. Stolen. In the servant's doorway, Frankie Bellini stood with the bread tray still in his hands. 61 years old, 3 generations in this house, and he had been the one who had lifted Rosa from the linen closet floor 3 weeks ago. The tray in his hands trembled a 1/4 inch. Bread rolls shifted against the silver. Frankie's eyes rose. Alessandro's eyes met them across the length of the room. Neither face changed, but Frankie gave a small tightening of his jaw, invisible to anyone who had not buried the same woman, and Alessandro returned a single fractional lowering of his eyelids. Rosa's necklace. Confirmed. Lily took 1 more step into the room. Her small bare feet made no sound on the cold marble. Mr. Buttons was clutched sideways against her chest, 1 long ear folded down over her arm. She did not look at Alessandro. She looked only at Isabella, not with anger, with the same serious dark eyes her mother had used at that kitchen window for 15 years. Eyes that noticed everything. Eyes that were not going to look away. Alessandro Moretti had ordered men killed for offenses smaller than that look, but this time, he needed the woman wearing the pendant to open her mouth first. He waited. Isabella smiled. Isabella found her rehearsed smile in a 1.5 seconds. It was the wrong length. A truthful smile arrives on its own time. A rehearsed one arrives when you remember to send it. Alessandro, who had watched 300 men lie to him across 300 tables, saw the exact moment her jaw released and her eyes softened on command. He did not react. He simply logged it. She leaned toward Lily with a voice pitched 3 notes higher than the one she used in bed. "Sweetheart, this is a gift Uncle Alessandro gave me last month. You must be thinking of another necklace your mama had." Her eyes darted to Alessandro's. Reflex more than strategy. The small automatic glance of a woman who had spent her whole life having her lies confirmed by the man beside her. Alessandro did not confirm. He did not deny. He held her gaze for exactly the length of time it took her smile to begin trembling at the corners, and then he looked back at the pendant on her collarbone. His silence was a specific silence. 16 years of rule had taught him how to use it like a blade, never blunt, never loud, always inserted at the joint. Lily shook her head slowly. Her small jaw set. She was 4 years old, and she had been raised by a woman who had told her, more than once, that a lie in this house was a heavier thing than a broken cup. No, Mama gave it to me. She said it was her last keepsake. The lady took it. The word took fell into the room like a stone dropped into cold water. Something in the air changed pressure. Roberto Genovese's eyes flicked toward the double doors as though measuring the distance. Salvatore Grasso placed both hands flat on his thighs beneath the table so no one at the table would see them shake. Isabella laughed. It was a short, high sound, half a note above where laughter should have lived, and she turned it toward Alessandro, like a woman offering him a rope. Alessandro, sweetheart, the child is grieving. She doesn't know what she's saying. Please. He did not answer her. He did not look at her. Instead, he moved one hand behind the arm of his chair and pressed a small brass button set into the underside of the table. It was a button he had not pressed in 6 years, not since the night a soldier had disrespected his mother's memory over dessert and had needed to be walked out through a door he did not walk back through. 3 seconds. Then the side door opened without sound and Luca Vitali stepped into the room. No weapon visible, jacket buttoned, hands loose at his sides. Every man at the table understood the arithmetic of that entrance without needing to see anything metal. Alessandro spoke to Luca in a voice not much louder than the guttering candle. Take our guests to the drawing room. Pour them brandy. Apologize on my behalf. Tommaso Ricci stood first. Nico Fontana second. Salvatore Grasso needed a small push from the edge of the table to rise. Roberto Genovese forgot his napkin entirely. It stayed folded on his chair, a small white flag no one would return for. None of them looked at Isabella. None of them looked at Lily. They passed Luca in single file with the mute gratitude of men allowed to leave a room where a decision was about to be made that they did not want to witness. The heavy oak doors closed behind them. The sound was small but final. 5 people remained. Alessandro at the head, Isabella at his right, Luca beside the closed door, Frankie in the servant's doorway with the bread tray finally lowered onto the sideboard, and Lily, still in the arched doorway, still in bare feet, still holding Mr. Buttons sideways against her chest. Alessandro finally spoke. He did not look at Isabella. He looked at the child. Sweetheart, come here to me. Would that be all right? Lily considered him for the length of one small breath. Then she walked. Her bare feet crossed the cold marble without hurry, without hesitation, past the length of the long mahogany table, past the pulled-out chairs of the departed guests, past Isabella. She did not glance at Isabella and stopped at the arm of Alessandro's chair. She lifted her free hand and closed her small fingers around his index finger. She did not squeeze. She simply held on. Alessandro looked down at that small hand on his own. He had signed contracts with this hand. He had loaded weapons with this hand. He had, 3 weeks ago, signed the release papers for Rosa Mendez's body with this hand. From the moment those small fingers closed around his, the Moretti estate stopped being a house. It had just become a crime scene. Alessandro did not stand right away. He kept Lily's small index finger inside his own hand for 10 more seconds. 10 seconds was a long count in a room like this one, long enough for Isabella to shift in her chair, long enough for Frankie to lower the bread tray fully onto the sideboard, long enough for the candle at the center of the table to drop another half-inch of wax onto the linen. But he needed those 10 seconds, because he had learned something a long time ago, in a different life, from watching his father with frightened people. If a large man rises too quickly in front of a small person, the small person will remember the size for the rest of their life. And Alessandro needed this child not to be afraid of him. He looked up at Luca, still standing by the closed door with his hands loose at his sides. He said 3 words, at the volume a man uses to order a second glass of wine. Seal the estate. Luca inclined his head half an inch and left the room. 90 seconds. That was all it took. 90 seconds for the outer gates to lock with the low mechanical thump that could be heard through the stone walls if you knew what you were listening for. 90 seconds for 2 additional guards to appear at the base of the main staircase, jackets buttoned, hands folded in front of them. 90 seconds for a third to take the door to the east wing corridor, and a fourth to take the service elevator, and for the small red light above the north pantry, the one no one in the family ever noticed, to blink on, meaning the perimeter alarms had been armed to full occupancy. In the corridor outside the dining room, on the silver tray at the console table where Isabella had left it when she came down for dinner, her mobile phone still lay face down. Frankie walked past it on his way back to his post, lifted it without breaking stride, carried it into the library, and locked it inside the lower drawer of Alessandro's desk. He did not need to be told. He had worked in this house long enough to know which small objects became dangerous when a night turned. Isabella understood before anyone said a word. Her smile did not vanish. She was too intelligent for that. But the corners loosened, and the small muscles beside her eyes let go of the tension that had been holding the whole expression up. She stood. "Alessandro, you aren't suspecting me because of a 4-year-old, are you?" He looked at her. It was the first time he had looked at her since Lily had spoken. The look lasted exactly 3 seconds. There was no anger in it. There was no accusation in it. He was measuring her the way he had measured a rival's account books, the way he had measured the load-bearing wall of a building he intended to buy. His eyes moved across her face once, from hairline to jaw, cataloging what he saw and what he now knew he had been failing to see for 3 months. She sat back down, not because he had asked her to, because her legs decided for her. Alessandro looked away from her as though she had ceased to occupy a chair. He turned his palm up beneath Lily's small hand. "Come, let's go somewhere warmer." He rose, slowly, and the child rose with him without letting go of his finger. He walked her out of the dining room at the pace of a small 4-year-old with bare feet on cold marble, not at his own pace. Frankie fell in behind them at a distance of 5 steps, the distance of a man guarding, not a man following. Isabella was left in the dining room with the candle and the untouched wineglasses and the 2 silent guards who had stepped into the room the moment Alessandro's shadow left it. She did not scream. She did not weep. She placed her hands very flat on the linen in front of her and stared at the wall. In the library, Alessandro guided Lily to the deep leather chair beside the fireplace. It was a chair his father had died in, a decade and a half earlier, in an accident that had never been an accident. The brown leather was cracked at the arms from a lifetime of one man's hands. Lily sank into the cushion so completely that her bare feet swung 2 handspans clear of the floor. Alessandro did not sit in the opposing chair. He did not sit at the desk. He knelt on one knee in front of her, so that his eyes were level with hers, and so that Mr. Buttons, still clutched sideways against her chest, was between them like a small witness. "Lily, I need you to tell me. Not afraid. Not in a hurry. I believe you." She looked at him with her mother's serious dark eyes. She tightened her grip on Mr. Buttons, and she nodded once. What she was about to tell him would never stand up in any courthouse in the state of New York. It was the memory of a 4-year-old, half heard through sleep, 6 weeks stale. But in this house, on this night, in the leather chair his father had died in, the truthful word of a child was the first verdict of the evening. The trial had begun. Alessandro lowered himself from one knee to the rug. He sat cross-legged on the old Persian, palms loose on his thighs, so his eyes were slightly below hers instead of level with them. It was not a posture any of his men had ever seen him take. Frankie moved without being asked. He drew a thin gray wool blanket from the low chest beside the fireplace and laid it gently across Lily's bare feet and knees. She let him. Her serious dark eyes stayed on Alessandro. Frankie stepped back to the doorway. Alessandro asked his first question in the voice he used across a table when the man opposite him was about to lose more than he could afford. It was not a sweet voice. It was a real one. "Where did you see the necklace last?" Lily thought, not searching for the memory, but for the right words. "In the wooden box on the little table beside my bed. Mama gave it to me the first night she got very sick. She said, 'Keep it safe.' I put it in the box. The next morning it was still there. Then another day it wasn't. Do you remember which day it wasn't?" She bit her lower lip. "The day I couldn't find Mr. Buttons in the morning. Frankie found him under the kitchen chair after." From the doorway, Frankie's chin dipped almost imperceptibly. He remembered that day, 6 weeks ago, 3 weeks before Rosa had collapsed. Alessandro noted the date. "Did you see anyone come into your room at night?" "I was sleeping, but I heard the door. My mama walks very quiet. I know the sound. That night was not my mama's sound." "What did it sound like?" "Like shoes." He waited. "Hard shoes," she added. "Not my mama's shoes." He blinked once, slowly. He knew exactly what kind of shoes she was describing. Isabella owned 3 pairs of Italian patent leather heels with slim stiletto tips, and each of them struck the corridor marble with a specific double click he had learned to hear from 2 rooms away. He did not say this out loud. He would not put a word into a 4-year-old's mouth. Her memory was more valuable to him unpolluted. He asked instead, "Have you told anyone else about the necklace? Anyone at all?" She shook her head. "Once," slowly. "Mama said keep it a secret. I kept it. 3 words. I kept it." Something cracked open in Alessandro's chest at those 3 words. A 4-year-old had kept her dying mother's secret for 6 weeks, through Rosa's collapse, through the funeral, through 3 weeks of sleeping in a room whose yellow curtains no longer smelled like her mother. She had spoken tonight only because the necklace itself had appeared in front of her, and a child raised by Rosa Mendez did not let a stolen thing pass unnamed. Alessandro opened his palm and rested, it upturned on the wool blanket over her knee. He did not reach for her hand. He offered his own flat, open the way one offered a hand to a small animal that had chosen its own approach. Lily looked at his palm. Then she laid her own small hand on top of it. She did not grip. She did not hold. She simply placed. Alessandro closed his eyes for the length of one long breath. When he opened them, the room had reassembled itself around a single quiet fact. He had enough to know. But enough to know was not the same as enough to prove, and Isabella Romano would not confess to the word of a grieving child. He needed something she could not deny, and there was something in this house that had been watching her for 3 months without her knowing. Alessandro rose to his feet. He did not release Lily's small hand until Frankie had stepped forward and taken his place on the rug beside her. Alessandro pulled the library door closed behind him, with the softness of a man not wanting to wake a sleeping child. In the corridor, he stopped under the wall sconce beside the library door and placed his hand flat against a framed photograph that had hung there for 12 years. It was the last full family portrait taken in this house, his mother already dead, his father still alive. A spring afternoon in the East Garden. 4 rows of Morettis, 3 rows of staff behind them. Second row from the back. On the right, half in shadow beneath the wisteria arbor, Rosa Mendez, gray uniform, hands folded in front of her apron. The only face in the photograph, not smiling, not from unhappiness, but because she had not believed she belonged inside the frame at all. He had never asked her about that. He had passed this photograph twice a day for 12 years, and had never once truly looked at her in it. He looked now. 7 seconds. It was not long, but it was long enough for a memory he had not permitted himself in 3 weeks to arrive without asking. Rosa's hands. He had watched those hands set a coffee cup on his desk 20,000 mornings. The right thumb had a small callus at its outer edge from the lid of an old thermos she had used and refused to replace for 8 years. He remembered that callus. He had never thought of it as a thing worth remembering. He drew his hand away from the frame and walked. Down the corridor, down the servants' stair, along the back passage where the stone floor was uneven from a century of foot traffic. The security room lay behind a plain oak door in the lower level of the house, unmarked, unremarkable. Only 3 people in the estate held the code. Himself, Luca, and Marco Ferraro, the head of security. Alessandro entered his sequence. The lock released. Luca was already at the console. The pale green light of the monitors reflected across the flat planes of his face and made him look, for a moment, like a much younger man Alessandro had known once in a Bay Ridge basement 30 years ago. Al, which camera? East Wing, 2nd floor corridor, Friday night of the 3rd week of last month. Luca did not ask why. 6 weeks ago, the night a small stuffed rabbit had ended up under a kitchen chair. He typed, the screen filled with a black and white image, timestamp burning in the lower corner. The corridor sat empty. Lily's door was closed at the far end. The wall sconce halfway down the hall gave off its familiar dim glow. Alessandro pulled a folding chair beside Luca's and lowered himself into it. He said nothing. Luca scrubbed forward. 11 at night. Midnight. The corridor stayed empty. 12:20. Nothing. 12:50. Nothing. Luca was about to shake his head when Alessandro raised one hand, palm out. Slow it down. 1:13 in the morning. A figure entered the frame from the direction of the main staircase. She was moving carefully, not creeping, but walking with the deliberate softness of a woman aware of every board beneath her. Dark nightdress. Hair loose down her back. From this angle, her face was hidden by the fall of that hair, but her feet, not bare. Alessandro saw it in the same instant Luca did. Not bare feet. Soft indoor shoes. Something padded, quiet on marble but not silent. The figure reached Lily's door. A gloved hand, black, Alessandro noted. Black leather closed on the handle. The door opened. The figure slipped inside. The door closed behind her without a sound. Alessandro did not look away from the screen. He counted. Luca counted with him. 2 minutes 43 seconds later, precisely 2:43, not 2:40, the door opened again from the inside. The figure stepped back into the corridor. One black-gloved hand hung at her side. Something small hung from the other hand between 2 fingers. It caught the light of the corridor sconce for less than a second as she passed beneath it. A brief flash of gold, something small, oval, swinging on a thin chain. Luca froze the frame, zoomed. The old camera's resolution was poor. The image bloomed with grain, but the shape was unmistakable. A thin gold chain, an oval pendant, swinging from a gloved index finger. Alessandro did not exhale. He did not lean back. He did not move. He said quietly, "Slow it further. "Show me her face." The camera had recorded honestly, and honesty, Alessandro was about to learn, could be crueler than truth itself. Luca scrubbed the frame backward 30 seconds. The figure re-entered from the direction of the main staircase, and this time Luca stopped her before her head lowered. There was a moment, half a second, no more, as she passed beneath the wall sconce halfway down the east wing corridor, when the lamp caught her face from above and slightly to the side. Luca paused on that exact frame, adjusted the contrast slider, sharpened the midtones, zoomed 4 times. The old infrared camera was not built for portraiture. The image swelled with grain, and the yellow-tinted lamplight bled the details. But it did not need to give them a clean photograph. It only needed to give Alessandro 3 things: the line of her jaw, the narrow spacing between her brows, the particular shape of her right cheekbone, seen from 3/4 above. Alessandro had studied that right cheekbone across 90 breakfast tables in the last 3 months. He had watched it catch morning light in the east garden. He had watched it turn away from him when she thought he was not looking, when her face relaxed from its rehearsed softness into its true architecture. Isabella Romano. Luca sat back in his chair. He did not speak. Alessandro did not speak either. For 30 seconds the 2 men looked at the frozen frame in silence. Somewhere above them, at the far end of the same east wing corridor whose image was frozen on this screen, the yellow-curtained bedroom of a 4-year-old girl waited empty in the dark. That corridor had been a quiet corridor for 15 years. Only one set of footsteps had ever passed down it after midnight, a woman in soft-soled slippers, going to check on her daughter's breathing. On the night in this frame, someone else had walked that route in a woman's shoes. Alessandro finally spoke. His voice was level. "That's one night. I need all of them." Luca pulled up the camera archive. The system on the primary drive held 30 rolling days standard. But Alessandro had installed something else, quietly, after the attempted intrusion in the winter of 2018. Automatic weekly backup to an off-site server in Newark, a server no one else in the household knew existed. Luca had forgotten it was there. Alessandro had not. Password. A wait of 9 seconds while the encrypted directory unlocked. A folder tree opened on the secondary monitor. 4 full weeks of East Wing footage, preserved and unaware of itself. Luca filtered by the frame that included Lily's door. He set the software to isolate any motion event in the corridor between midnight and 5 in the morning across all 28 nights. The results returned in under a minute. Beyond the night they had already watched, there were 3 others. In each of the 3, the same figure, same dark nightdress, same soft-soled shoes, same black-gloved hand on the door handle. Each visit was brief, under 4 minutes. She entered, she stayed, she left, empty-handed, all 3 times. She had been rehearsing, verifying the location of the box on the bedside table, confirming the child slept through her presence, measuring the exact distance from the door to the drawer and back again. She had performed the actual theft on the 4th visit, the visit they had watched a moment ago, with the confidence of a woman who had already stood beside that sleeping child 3 times. It was not impulse, it was research. Alessandro closed his eyes for the space of 1 breath. He opened them. The pantry. Luca switched cameras. There was no camera inside the pantry itself, only one in the service corridor outside, trained on the pass-through to the kitchen. But the pantry door opened outward at an angle that placed it partly within the corridor camera's field of view, provided it opened wide enough. Any longer visit into the pantry would register. Luca filtered by the hour when Rosa was reliably absent. Rosa had taken her first coffee of the morning at the kitchen table every day for 15 years, 5:30 to 6, without variation, the closest thing she had ever allowed herself to a ritual of her own. In the 4 weeks before Rosa's death, the service corridor camera had recorded the pantry door opening 7 times during that window. 4 of the 7 were Frankie. He came in each time for the olive oil kept on the middle shelf. Alessandro recognized the shape of his shoulders in each frame without needing to zoom. The other 3 were not Frankie. Same dark nightdress, same slow motion. Isabella. 3 visits, each in the 5:30 to 6 window, each while Rosa was 30 feet away, drinking her coffee at the kitchen table with her back to the pantry door, hearing nothing. The camera had recorded the door opening. The camera had recorded her passing through it. The camera had not, and could not, record which hand had lifted a small brown bottle from a shelf inside the pantry, or which hand had set a different bottle in its place. For that, Alessandro would need something the camera had never been able to give him. He would need the bottle itself. Alessandro needed the theft itself. The night the necklace had actually crossed the threshold of Lily's door in Isabella's gloved hand. Not scrubbed forward, not fast, in real time. "That one," he said. "Play it clean. Full speed." Luca reset the file. 1:13 in the morning. 8 nights before the morning Rosa had collapsed on the third-floor linen closet floor. The figure entered from the direction of the main staircase. The gloved hand closed on the door handle. The door opened. The door closed. Alessandro counted seconds in his head. The scrubbed footage had given him the impression of 2:40. It was not 2:40. It was a full 2 minutes and 43 seconds measured from the last movement of the closing door to the first movement of it opening again before Isabella stepped back into the corridor. In those 2 minutes and 43 seconds, a woman had walked past the sleeping breath of a 4-year-old, lifted the wooden lid of the box on the bedside table, closed her gloved fingers around a thin gold chain still warm from where it had lain against her mother's collarbone the day before, replaced the lid, crossed the room again, and left without disturbing a single fold of the child's blanket. She had done all of it without making Lily so much as turn over in her sleep. Alessandro did not feel angry anymore. The anger had passed into something quieter and sharper, the state his men referred to, when he was not in the room, as when Al goes quiet. It was the stillness a knife had before it entered. Luca knew the signs. He said nothing. Alessandro spoke without looking away from the frozen final frame. "Export everything. 3 copies. 1 for me, 1 for you, 1 in Frankie's safe." Luca nodded once and began the transfer. While the drive whirred, Alessandro stood. He walked the 4 short paces from the console to the opposite wall, a bank of 6 monitors, each split into 4 quadrants, covering 24 zones of the estate. In the upper left panel, the library camera glowed steadily. Inside the library, Lily still sat in the brown leather chair beside the fireplace. Frankie had drawn the small footstool close and was folding a white linen napkin with the slow, deliberate hands of an old man teaching a small hand how a thing was done. His fingers trembled slightly. 61 years and a long night, but they did not miss a fold. Lily watched him with her mother's serious dark eyes. When the napkin was finished, when it stood upright on Frankie's palm in the shape of a crane, she took it from him with both hands and set it carefully in her lap beside Mr. Buttons, as though the paper bird required the same respect the rabbit did. Alessandro looked at that frame for longer than he needed to. He had never had a child. He had never planned to. His father had died at a red light on Roosevelt Avenue when Alessandro was 22, 3 bullets through the driver's side glass, and at the funeral Alessandro had made a single quiet decision inside himself. The Moretti bloodline would end with him. He would not sire a target. He would not put a small version of his own face into a world that had already killed the larger one. But now, watching a 4-year-old girl on a black and white monitor set a folded paper crane beside a stuffed rabbit in her lap with the seriousness of a small priest, he understood something he had not permitted himself to understand in the 3 weeks since Rosa's funeral. Rosa had trusted him with her daughter. Not aloud, not in words. She had not left a letter. She had not summoned him to her bedside. She had not had time. The warfarin, whatever they were about to name it, had not left her time. But she had lived for 15 years under his roof because she believed, in the quiet arithmetic she performed each night at her kitchen window, that his roof was safe enough to raise a small girl under, and she had been wrong. He would not allow her to be wrong twice. From behind him, export complete, 3 copies. Alessandro did not turn around. The physical evidence. The iron bottle Rosa took every morning. Where is it now? The small radio at his belt crackled once. Frankie's voice came through low, from his post beside the library chair. 3rd shelf up. Left side of the pantry. Nobody's touched it. Nobody's been in that pantry since the morning she went. Alessandro let out one slow breath. The camera had told him half of the story. The other half was waiting for him inside a small brown plastic bottle that no one in the house had ever thought worth noticing. Alessandro went for the bottle himself. He did not send Luca. He did not send Marco. He did not radio Frankie to bring it up. Some objects a man had to lift with his own hand, or they never truly became his to answer for. He climbed the servant's stair in soft leather house slippers that made no sound on the old tile. The service corridor ran along the back of the house, narrow and dim, still holding the faint smell of Rosa's cooking from 3 weeks ago, bay leaf, garlic softening in olive oil, the ghost of a Sunday sauce that no one had made in the kitchen since. The pantry door stood at the far end. The single low-wattage security lamp inside still burned pale yellow. Frankie had not turned it off. Not on the morning the paramedics had taken Rosa out. Not the day after. Not in the 22 days since. It had burned continuously, a small vigil no one had asked him to keep. 3rd shelf up, left side. The bottle sat exactly where Rosa had last set it down. A small brown plastic pharmacy bottle, the kind dispensed by 10,000 corner drugstores in 5 boroughs. Prescription label facing outward, the way Rosa always faced her labels. In her neat block letters, the pharmacist's printed lines: ferrous sulfate, 325 milligrams. R. Mendez. 1 tablet daily with food. Alessandro stopped 1 pace short of the shelf. He looked at the label, and now, with the eyes of a man who had spent the last hour learning what he had been failing to see, he saw it. The lower right corner of the label was slightly puckered, a faint crescent where the adhesive had lifted and been pressed back down. Not clumsy work, careful work, just imperfect. The label had been peeled away once, and returned. He did not touch the bottle with his bare hand. He took a clean paper napkin from the small stack on the shelf below the pale linen napkins Rosa had folded herself. Still in the arrangement she had left them, and wrapped it around the bottle. He lifted it as though it had been waiting 15 years to be heard. He did not open the cap. He knew who needed to be the one to open it. He carried it back down through the servants' stair, one soft footfall at a time, cradled in his palm the way one carried a small living thing. In the security room, he set the bottle on the console between himself and Luca. Luca looked at it. Then he lifted the internal handset, dialed 3 digits, and spoke a single instruction. Vito. Downstairs. Bring the case. Vito Caligari arrived in under 7 minutes. 58 years old, silver at his temples, a black cardigan pulled over pajamas he had not bothered to change out of. His eyes were still half in sleep. His hands were already awake. He carried a battered brown leather physician's case that had belonged to his father before him, a case that had entered this house first in the era of Alessandro's own father, for reasons that had never been written down. Vito did not ask why he had been called. He looked at the small brown bottle on the console, set his case on the empty chair, and drew on a pair of nitrile gloves without a word. Alessandro spoke quietly. This is the bottle Rosa Mendez took from every morning for the 4 to 6 weeks before she died. The label says ferrous sulfate. I need to know what is actually inside. As fast as you can tell me. Vito nodded once. He placed the bottle on a small stainless tray from his case, turned the cap, and tipped 3 tablets into his gloved palm. 3 oval tablets, deep reddish-brown, the correct color of ferrous sulfate, 325 milligrams. He lifted one between thumb and forefinger and turned it slowly beneath the console lamp. He was quiet for 2 full seconds. Then, without looking up, whoever made this knew what they were doing. This isn't a kitchen job. He pointed with his little finger at the tablet's midline. A faint seam ran horizontally across it, hair-thin, almost invisible, the kind of line only an eye that had inspected 10,000 capsules would catch. Ferrous sulfate tablets were solid, compressed pellets. They had no seam. What sat in Vito's palm had been a 2-part gelatin capsule packed with something, then reformed inside a compressed shell dyed to match ferrous sulfate. It was work that required a proper pill press. It required a stock of matching dye. It required someone with pharmaceutical training, or someone with access to a person who had it. Vito opened his leather case and drew out a small folded strip of reagent papers. He set the tablet on the tray, crushed it with the flat back of a spoon into a fine powder, and touched a single drop of clear liquid to the powder from a dark glass dropper. 3 seconds. The powder darkened from reddish-brown to deep purple. Vito lifted his eyes. The sleep was entirely gone from them. This is not iron. This is warfarin, high dose, ground and repackaged inside a ferrous sulfate shell. For 3 weeks, the Moretti estate had buried a woman who had died of natural causes. Rosa Mendez had had a stroke. The doctors had signed their names to the certificate. The parish priest had said the words. Alessandro had chosen the coffin. Frankie had chosen the flowers. In the next 30 seconds, none of that would still be true. Alessandro did not ask him to test it again. Vito Caligari had never been wrong in 30 years. He was not going to be wrong tonight. Alessandro rose from his chair without speaking, crossed the 4 short paces to the back wall of the security room, and placed both palms flat against the cold plaster. Not to lean. He did not need to lean. He needed to press something in his chest downward into the place it needed to remain a hard downward pressure, like a man pushing a lid onto a container that must not be allowed to open until he chose the time. Luca stood behind him without approaching. There was nothing to say. There was nothing that saying would improve. At the console, Vito worked quietly. He folded the remaining 2 tablets into small squares of waxed paper, sealed each in a labeled evidence pouch with a dated adhesive strip, and set the pouches into the interior compartment of his leather case. He wiped the tray. He wiped the console. He wiped the interior of the small brown bottle before sealing it too. He had done this 3 times before in his career for the Moretti family. Never once had it been for anything good. Alessandro finally turned back from the wall. His voice, when it came, was terrifyingly ordinary. How long? Vito understood the question without needing it clarified. He spoke the way an old physician speaks clinically, without decoration. Warfarin at this dose, taken daily. In a woman Rosa's age with baseline blood pressure inside normal range, symptoms begin at roughly 10 days. Dizziness, headaches, easy bruising, hemorrhagic stroke inside 4 to 6 weeks is typical. If she had any underlying vascular weakness, a small aneurysm no one had ever caught, thinning of a cerebral vessel sooner. Rosa had begun complaining of headaches and dizziness 6 weeks before her death. Alessandro knew this because Frankie had said it aloud at the funeral, not in the church. In the parking lot afterward, standing beside the hearse, low-voiced, blaming himself for not driving her to a doctor. 6 weeks, boss. I saw it and I did nothing. 6 weeks. It matched. Alessandro closed his eyes for the length of one breath. He opened them. He looked at Luca. Where is she? Still in the dining room. Frankie locked it from the outside. She asked to use the restroom. I sent a female guard with her. Alessandro nodded once. There was no feeling in the gesture anymore. It had become a purely functional motion. He turned to Vito. Stay here. I may need you again inside an hour. Vito nodded. Alessandro and Luca left the security room and started up the servants' corridor toward the main staircase. The house above them was very still. Only the low hum of the perimeter alarms and, somewhere 3 floors up, the distant tick of the grandfather clock in the corridor. Halfway up the stair, Luca spoke without breaking stride, keeping his voice low. Al, the police? Alessandro did not turn his head. Not yet. I need a name from her first. Warfarin doesn't walk itself into a bottle. She did not think of this alone. Someone taught her how or paid her to do it. I need to know who. Luca gave a single nod. He had walked beside this man long enough to hear exactly what was being calculated in the sentences beneath the sentences. This was no longer the murder of one woman inside a house. This had become the far more serious matter of someone believing they could reach into the Moretti estate and not be reached back. That belief was a mistake. Mistakes of that shape had to be corrected in a specific way, or every other family in 5 boroughs would begin to hold the same belief inside a month. Alessandro's father had understood this. His grandfather had understood it. It was the one lesson that had never been written down anywhere and had never once been forgotten. They reached the dining room. The 2 guards at the door stepped aside. Frankie's key turned in the lock. Isabella sat upright at the far end of the long table, exactly where she had been left. Her hands were folded on the linen in front of her right hand, loosely over left. Thumbs tucked the posture of a woman rehearsing how to look innocent for the length of time she now suspected she was going to need to look innocent. She had removed the necklace at some point. The chain and pendant lay coiled beside her wineglass, a small gold snake on white cloth. Her head rose when the door opened. A smile tried to assemble itself on her mouth. It did not have the strength to fully arrive. Alessandro walked the length of the table without hurry. He pulled out the chair directly opposite her and sat down. He set nothing between them. Not the bottle, not the evidence pouch, not the necklace, not a single printed still from the East Wing camera. He simply laid both his palms flat on the wood of the table. He did not need props. He needed only one question. Alessandro looked at Isabella for 30 seconds before he said anything. She tried to hold his gaze. She lasted 8 seconds. On the 9th, her eyes fell to the small nest of her folded hands on the linen in front of her. She did not raise them again. When he finally spoke, his voice was no louder than the fireplace at the far end of the room. Before I ask you the question I am about to ask, I need you to understand 3 things. 1. We have the camera. You entered Lily's room at 1:13 in the morning on the night of the 18th of last month. 2. We have the bottle. The one Rosa took from every morning at 5:30 for the 6 weeks before she collapsed. 3. Vito Caligari has just confirmed that what is inside that bottle is ground warfarin, repackaged inside a ferrous sulfate shell. He paused for one breath. Now you understand where you are, don't you? Isabella did not answer. She drew a short breath in through her nose. Her shoulders shook once beneath the silk of her dress. One small, involuntary rise and fall, and then stilled. Alessandro did not soften his voice. I don't need you to apologize. I don't need you to cry. I need a name. Who paid you to do this? 7 seconds of silence. He counted them. Then Isabella did something he had not expected. She laughed. It was a very short laugh, 1 syllable. No joy in it. Entirely without color. It was the sound a person makes when they have been holding a heavy thing for a long time, and are, at last, permitted to set it down. When she spoke the name, she spoke it almost gratefully. Vincent De Luca. Alessandro did not react on the surface. He did not blink. He did not shift his hands on the table. Beneath the surface, however, An entire set of calculations that had been sitting scattered inside his head for 3 months rearranged themselves in under 2 seconds. The Queen's waterfront, the ports, the list of shipping brokers who had quietly switched contracts in the spring without adequate explanation. 2 attempted hits inside Bay Ridge in April that had been read as intra-borough noise and dismissed. A container flagged and seized in Hoboken in July that his people had chalked up to random customs sweep. None of it random, none of it noise. All of it a single line of intention, laid over 3 months, invisible only because Alessandro had believed his own house was quiet. His house had not been quiet. His house had been listening from the guest room. How long? Before I came here. My father owed him. Vincent cleared the debt in exchange for me. He wanted me inside your house. For what? Isabella lifted her eyes for the first time in the conversation. Not to plead, not to persuade. Only to finish saying the thing she had begun. To listen. To photograph your ledgers in the library. To know when you left for Chicago. When Luca left for Boston. For the first 6 months, that was all. I was good at it. I have been good at it. Alessandro did not shift his gaze. And Rosa? She blinked. Rosa came into my sitting room to dust 3 months ago. She moved a coat off my desk. Her hand brushed the trackpad. The screen woke. I wasn't in the room, but the small camera above my vanity caught her 8 seconds of her standing there, looking at the screen, then walking out. I called Vincent that night. He told me it had to be handled. I asked how. 2 days later, a courier from Astoria delivered a small padded envelope to the estate gate under a florist's name. Inside, warfarin, instructions. Alessandro did not look away from her. Did you think Rosa would tell me? Isabella went quiet. The candles at the center of the long table had burned 3/4 down. The wax pooled in small, uneven puddles at their bases. Somewhere in the estate, faintly, a radio crackled and went still again. No, I knew she wouldn't. I had lived in this house 3 months. I knew Rosa. She was not going to say a word. She was going to sit on what she'd seen and think about how to bring it to you without endangering the child. It might have taken her a year. It might have taken her 3. But she was not going to tell anyone else. She wasn't built for that. A pause. But Vincent didn't believe that. And she stopped. She swallowed. Her hands stayed folded. I was not going to ask him a second time. It was the first time in the entire conversation, perhaps the first time in the 3 months she had lived under his roof, that Isabella Romano had spoken a completely true sentence. Alessandro heard it. He did not soften. But somewhere in the same place he had counted the seconds, he registered a second and quieter recognition. She was not the architect. She had held the knife. She had ground the pills. She had crossed the pantry doorway 3 times before entering Lily's room the 4th time. All of that was hers, and none of it would be forgiven. But the mind that had chosen Rosa Mendez as an acceptable cost, the mind that had done the arithmetic and decided a 15-year housekeeper could be quietly erased for the sake of a listening post, that mind belonged to another man entirely. Isabella Romano was a piece on someone else's board, and Alessandro Moretti had just been given the name of the player. Alessandro did not speak at once. He let the name hang in the air between them. Vincent De Luca, 62 years old, controller of the Red Hook Wharfs and 3 berths in Queens. De Luca's father had done business with Alessandro's father through the 90s, until a shipping dispute at the Newark docks in 98 drew a quiet line down the middle of the harbor between the 2 families. Since then, cold peace. No open guns. Both houses had understood the peace would last only so long as neither reached across the line. Vincent had just reached across, and he had not reached for territory or a contract. He had reached inside the Moretti walls and taken the life of a woman who had scrubbed those walls for 15 years without complaint. That was not tactics. That was a declaration. Alessandro spoke again, voice unchanged. How did you contact him? A burner. Rotated every 3 weeks. The current one is in the pocket of the white cashmere coat in my closet, lower shelf, tucked under the lining. When did you last report? Last night. After you went to bed. I told him you were signing with Genovese Shipping this week. What did he say? He told me to hold my position. He said it might come sooner than planned. Alessandro's eyes cut once toward Luca in the doorway. Sooner than planned. Vincent had been building toward a move, a large one, aimed at the waterfront, and Isabella had been the ear inside the walls. That plan was now on a clock. Isabella had been exposed tonight. Within hours, Vincent would learn it, and the moment he did, 2 things would happen very fast. 1, he would try to erase her before she said anything further. 2, he would try to seize the only remaining piece of leverage he had left, the child. Alessandro stood up. He did not look at Isabella again. He spoke to Luca over her head. "Take her down to the storage cellar under the library. Frankie keeps the key. No one goes in. No phone. She eats when Frankie brings it down." 2 guards stepped in from the corridor. Isabella rose without resistance. Her hand settled at her sides. At the doorway, she stopped. She did not turn to look at Alessandro. She turned instead toward the far end of the corridor, toward the library. She spoke, softly, to herself. "The child is very much like her mother. That was the thing I did not calculate. I thought she would forget." Then she walked out. Alessandro stayed where he was. The candles at the center of the table had burned down by a full third. Outside the tall east windows, mist was beginning to lift off the estate pond in slow gray ropes, the way it had lifted every autumn morning of the 15 years. Rosa had stood at the kitchen window watching it. He thought about Rosa. He thought about a single sentence she had spoken to him 7 years earlier, when he had asked whether she wanted a paid month to travel back to Puebla to see her aging mother. She had considered the question in her serious, quiet way. Then she had answered, "Sir, if I stay here, Lily is safe. If I go there, I'm not sure." She had lived 15 years under his roof for one reason. She had believed his roof was the safest place in the world for her daughter, and he had let her be murdered inside his walls. There were debts that could not be paid in currency. There were debts that could only be paid in the blood of the man who had caused them. Vincent DeLuca had one such debt now. Alessandro walked back through the corridor to the library. The door was ajar an inch, Frankie's habit, so he could hear anything in the hall without being seen from it. Alessandro pushed it open the width of his shoulder and stopped. Lily had fallen asleep in the brown leather chair. Her head had tipped sideways against the wing of the cushion. Mr. Buttons was tucked under her chin. The folded paper crane sat on her lap where she had placed it. Frankie had drawn the gray wool blanket up to her shoulders and now sat on the small stool beside the chair, keeping the kind of watch he had kept over sleeping children in this house for 40 years. Alessandro looked at her for one long breath. Then he stepped back and pulled the door quietly closed. "Luca." Luca came up beside him without a sound. "I need to know exactly what Rosa saw on Isabella's laptop." They climbed to the second floor, moved down the east wing corridor, and stopped at the door of her sitting room. Luca opened it with the service key. The room lay untouched, an uncapped bottle of perfume on the vanity, a silk shawl over the writing chair, a thin silver laptop closed at an angle on the desk beside the window. It looked, in fact, like the room of a person who had not expected the evening to end the way it had. Alessandro drew on a pair of white cotton gloves, not for fingerprints, so that when the time came for other people to look at what he was about to open, he would not have contaminated the surface of anything that might need to speak for itself. He opened the laptop. A password prompt. He lifted his radio. Vito. East Wing sitting room. Vito arrived in 4 minutes. A small black USB drive on a lanyard around his neck. He plugged the drive into the side port. He typed one short command. He waits 30 seconds. The desktop appeared. Vito did not look at what was on it. He unplugged the drive, gave Alessandro a single small nod, and stepped out, pulling the door closed behind him. In 30 years, he had learned exactly how much he needed not to know. Alessandro sat down. He opened the browser history first. Most of it was clean fashion, restaurants, a lifestyle account with photographs of beaches and dinner plates, competent camouflage. He opened the file directory. Inside documents, he found a subfolder with the mildest possible label. Wedding planning. 6 Excel files. He opened the first. It was not a guest list. It was a spreadsheet of wire transfers. Date, account number, dollar amount, shorthand annotation. He recognized 3 of the account numbers on site, 1 in Cyprus, 1 in Panama, 1 in Malta, all 3 flagged on a list a Manhattan source had given him a year earlier, accounts Vincent DeLuca had reportedly used to move port money through European shells. 4 other accounts he did not recognize. The dollar amounts were modest per transaction. 20,000 here, 35 there, 50. None of them large enough to trip a filing threshold on its own. But by the time he reached the bottom of the file, the 6-month running total had crossed $4 million. Rosa had seen this screen. She had seen it exactly the way he was seeing it now. She had not needed to understand the routing. She had only needed to read 3 letters in the shorthand column DLC, beside a dollar figure that had no legitimate reason to exist inside the walls of the Moretti estate. She had said nothing. For 3 months she had carried what she had seen in silence. Perhaps because she was afraid speaking would put Lily at risk. Perhaps because she was trying to find a way to tell him without exposing herself. Whatever her reason, she had not been given the time. Alessandro copied the entire folder onto a second USB from his own pocket. He closed the laptop. He drew off the gloves. At the door, he paused and looked back once at the small, careful theater of an innocent young woman's evening. Then he switched off the light. Vincent DeLuca did not know it yet. In 30 minutes, he was going to be the only remaining target on Alessandro Moretti's list. Isabella was taken down to the storage cellar beneath the library. It was a small, stone-walled room. No window. A single low-wattage bulb on a chain. The estate had originally used it for wine, then for records, then for nothing at all. Tonight it had one purpose. Frankie locked the heavy oak door with the long iron key that only 3 men in the house held copies of himself: Alessandro, Luca, and settled onto the narrow wooden chair he had carried down from the pantry. He set a compact pistol across his knees. 61 years old. Arthritic knees. 40 years in this house. He would sit that chair until the sun came up. Inside the cellar, Isabella sat on the edge of the old single cot in her wine-red dress. She was not crying. She had run out of tears earlier in the evening. She was calculating not routes of escape, of which there were none, but something narrower. How long she could stay alive before Vincent DeLuca found a way to make her silent from the outside. She understood the arithmetic. It was not a long number. 3 floors above her, in the security room, Alessandro and Luca had gone to work. Alessandro had spread a paper map of Queens across the console paper. Not digital, because a paper map could not be uploaded, mirrored, or leaked. He marked 3 locations with a red pen: Vincent's principal warehouse in Red Hook, at the south end of the harbor; Vincent's private residence in Astoria, on a quiet block 3 streets in from the water; and a small storefront in Bensonhurst, the Verrazzano Bakery, a family Italian shop on 86th Street that Vincent used as a morning meeting point every Wednesday at 7. Alessandro did not need Vincent dead. Not yet. Alessandro needed Vincent to answer a single question before he died. The question was this: was there anyone else inside the Moretti organization that Vincent had purchased? Isabella had been the eye inside the walls of the estate, but Alessandro needed to know whether there was another eye inside the business, inside the Newark port crew, inside the Long Island construction management, inside the Midtown accounting office. If there was, and if he killed Vincent before extracting the name, the leak would keep bleeding. He would have won the confrontation and lost the war inside a season. Luca laid out 3 options. 1. Raid the Red Hook warehouse at dawn, take the compound with surprise and superior numbers. 2. Intercept Vincent on the way to the Verrazzano Bakery. Vincent's Wednesday routine was predictable to the hour, and today was Tuesday. 3. Send a false signal from Isabella's burner phone informing Vincent she needed emergency extraction. Draw Vincent, or his people, out to a controlled location. Alessandro considered the map for a full minute. Then he spoke. All 3, but in a different order. First, I need to see him react. I need to know which move he makes if he thinks Isabella has been exposed. Luca understood at once. You want him to send men here? Yes, to take Lily. That is his only rational move. She is the only leverage he has left. If he doesn't have her, he has no way to bargain. He'll try. We let him try. We let him try. He fails. And while he's failing, we learn exactly who is in his New York organization, how many, by what route, under whose command. Then we go to step 2. Luca gave one slow nod. He was already redistributing men in his head. I'll double the perimeter tonight. Snipers on the East Wing roof and the North Gable. Marco and 3 inside the East Wing hall. I move Lily into the panic room behind the library. Frankie holds the cellar door. I hold the panic room door myself. Alessandro nodded once. One more thing. If he sends people, I want at least one of them alive. I don't need the field commander. I just need one lucid enough to talk. Luca stood, folded the Queen's map into quarters, tucked it under his arm, and was already moving toward the door. In the next 80 minutes, the Moretti estate would stop being a house and become the most carefully arranged trap Vincent DeLuca had ever walked a man into. 3:10 in the morning, Alessandro sat at the security console with Isabella's burner phone open in front of him. He had studied her outgoing messages for the last hour, the 6 months of them Vito had recovered from the device. He had learned her rhythm. Short sentences, no commas. Numerals where a word would do. A woman who wrote as though she were being timed. He typed in her voice. Cover blown. He knows about the necklace. Need extraction now. G is asleep. Eastgate at 4. He did not sign it. He did not add anything. He read it once. He sent it. Across the city, in a 2-story brick house on a quiet street in Astoria, Vincent DeLuca woke at the vibration of the phone beneath his pillow. He sat up in the dark. He read the message twice. 62 years old, silver hair, deep-set eyes that had watched the harbor change for 4 decades. He was not alarmed. He was calculating. G was their code for Alessandro, short for Grande, the man on the hill. East Gate was the service entrance beside the estate's kitchen garden, the one Vincent knew from a paper sketch Isabella had smuggled out to him 3 months ago. 4 was 4 in the morning. All of it correct, all of it fluent, but something in the message was wrong. Isabella did not use the word blown. She used burnt. He had noted it in her first report to him a year ago, and every report since. She was a woman who kept her metaphors. Burnt cover, not blown. Vincent did not react on his face. He did not swear. He did not rise from the bed. He simply typed back, copy, sit tight, team en route. Then he set the phone down, crossed the bedroom, and lifted the interior handset. He did not order a team to extract Isabella. He ordered a team to take the child. Because Vincent had understood the truth in the 3 seconds it had taken him to notice the wrong verb. Isabella had not written that message. Alessandro had, which meant Isabella had either already spoken or was speaking now, which meant 3 months of embedded work inside Moretti walls had just been burned in a single night, which meant Vincent had exactly one piece of leverage left in the world to bargain with before Alessandro Moretti came to his door, the child. He gave the order in a voice as flat as the water outside his window. Team, ready in 20 minutes. 6 men, light body armor, suppressed weapons, 2 black unmarked SUVs. Enter the estate through the east gate exactly as Isabella's diagrams had shown, but not to collect Isabella. To pass through the kitchen garden, enter the east wing through the service door, take the back staircase to the 2nd floor, retrieve the little girl, and exit the same way. He hung up. He sat back down on the edge of the bed and rested his hands on his knees. He did not look pleased. He looked like a man who had just paid the tax on a mistake he had not caught in time. Inside the Moretti estate, Alessandro stood at the security console watching 6 perimeter monitors. He had a read receipt from Isabella's phone at 3:16. He had Vincent's reply, copy, sit tight, team en route, at 3:17. He knew Vincent had not believed the message. He knew Vincent had made a decision. What he did not yet know was which decision: extract Isabella, or take the child. He had prepared for both. Below, Luca had positioned 8 guards along the low garden walls and hedges surrounding the east gate. 4 snipers on the roof, 2 facing east, 2 southeast, covering the paths of approach from the neighboring estate road. Marco Ferraro and 3 men at the east wing service door, the door Alessandro judged Vincent's team most likely to use once they were inside the wall. Lily was in the panic room behind the library. 15-centimeter steel door, biometric lock. Alessandro had carried her in himself at 3:20, still asleep, and had transferred her from the leather chair by the fireplace onto the identical leather chair that had been placed inside the panic room years ago for exactly this contingency. She had not woken. Mr. Buttons was tucked under her chin. The folded paper crane sat on the small table beside her. Frankie sat outside the panic room door on a wooden chair, his compact pistol across his lap, his left palm resting flat against the steel of the door. He had not moved in 22 minutes. He had no intention of moving. 3:57 in the morning. The floodlight above the east gate went dark. Vincent DeLuca's men had just cut the power to the eastern perimeter. The trap was open. 3:58. 2 black SUVs stopped 200 meters short of the east gate on a private service road that ran through the neighboring estate. 6 men stepped out. No overhead lights. No slam of doors. They crossed the open ground on foot, spread in a loose column, and used a folding ladder to scale the low stone wall at the far edge of the kitchen garden. No sound. Dark jackets. Night vision optics. They believed the east gate would be unmanned after midnight. It was information Isabella had given Vincent 3 months ago, and Vincent had never bothered to verify. They were wrong. 4 in the morning. The first man's soft-soled boot had barely touched the raised bed inside the kitchen garden. On the east wing roof, a Moretti sharpshooter pressed the trigger for the first time that night. The first man dropped without a sound, his body folded forward across a row of late-season tomato steaks. The second man was still on the ladder when he went. He did not raise his weapon. He did not have time. The 4 survivors registered the trap in under 4 seconds and split 2 toward the east wing service door, 2 backward toward the wall they had just climbed. None of the 4 reached where they were going. The east wing service door swung open from the inside just as the first pair of runners reached it. Marco Ferraro and 3 guards, weapons already leveled, took both men down in the same instant they realized the door had been open for them from the beginning. The 2 who had turned back toward the wall dropped inside another 2 seconds, hit by the second rooftop shooter. All 6, 2 minutes 10 seconds. No shout carried into the corridors of the estate. The alarms did not sound. Somewhere 3 floors up, a small girl continued to sleep behind a steel door. In the security room, Alessandro watched it through the infrared feeds, without changing expression. He did not permit himself satisfaction. He simply noted. Luca went down to check the bodies himself. 4 of the 6 were dead within the first minute. Of the 2 who had fallen at the service door, one was breathing shallowly with a chest wound he would not last until sunrise. The other had taken a round in the shoulder, was conscious, was alert, and understood exactly where he was. This was the one Alessandro needed. Luca ordered 2 guards to carry him down, not to the storage cellar where Isabella sat under Frankie's chair, but to the old wine cellar on the opposite side of the sublevel. They stripped his tactical vest, cinched his wrists, dressed the shoulder wound tight enough to stop the bleeding and keep him lucid, and no tighter. They emptied his pockets onto a wooden crate. 2 mobile phones, 1 work, 1 personal, a worn leather wallet, a folding knife, 3 spare pistol magazines. Inside the wallet, a New Jersey driver's license, Anthony Sabatini, age 29, Union City address. Marco recognized the surname without needing to be told. The Sabatinis were one of 3 subordinate families the DeLucas ran in Hudson County. Not upper leadership, but high enough to know the shape of the New York organization. High enough to be useful. Alessandro came down to the wine cellar 7 minutes later. Anthony Sabatini sat propped against a stone pillar, his shirt darkening at the shoulder, his eyes still open and steady. He watched Alessandro enter with the flat expression of a man who had already begun the internal accounting of how much of his life had ended and how much of it might still be salvageable. Alessandro did not stand close. He stopped 4 paces away. He spoke in the same ordinary voice he had used at the dinner table. Anthony, you know who I am. You know where you are. You know that in about 7 hours the sun is going to come up. In those 7 hours, you have 2 paths available to you. 1. You tell me everything you know about the structure of Vincent DeLuca's organization in New York, and I put you in a car this morning and you leave the city with your bones intact. 2. You don't tell me, and I get the same information from another source over a longer period of time, but you do not need me to describe that second path in detail. Sabatini looked at him for 6 full seconds. Then he began to speak. Over the next 40 minutes, Alessandro received the entire map of the DeLuca organization across the 5 boroughs of New York, every capo, every accountant, every meeting spot, every route Vincent used to move himself between them, and one name he had not expected. While Alessandro worked on Sabatini in the wine cellar, Luca climbed the back stairs to the 2nd floor. Frankie sat exactly where he had been for the last 6 hours, the wooden chair outside the panic room door, the compact pistol still resting across his lap, his left palm still flat against the steel. His knees were killing him. He had not moved. Luca held out a paper cup of coffee. Quiet up here, Frank? Quiet. She woke at 4:03. Heard something through the wall. Was she scared? Frankie shook his head slowly. Not the way children get scared. She only asked one thing. She said, Uncle Frankie, is Uncle Alessandro all right? Luca was silent for a moment. What did you tell her? I told her Uncle Alessandro is protecting her, and nothing is going to happen to him. She nodded. Then she went back to sleep. Luca lifted his knuckles and tapped twice against the steel, the small signal Frankie and Lily had worked out during her first hour inside, meaning everything is fine, no one new is here. From the other side of the steel, a small answering tap came back, barely audible, a hand small enough to make even that faint sound difficult against the thickness of the door. Luca closed his eyes for 1 second. He had stood beside Alessandro for 15 years. He had seen many things and buried many things, but the light tap of a 4-year-old girl from inside a steel door after 6 armed men had just tried to take her was something he had not prepared to hear. He opened the small outer plate, took Frankie's key, and let himself into the panic room. The door closed behind him. The room was 15 square meters, thick stone walls, soft amber light, a single narrow bed against the far wall. The brown leather chair from the library Alessandro had ordered it moved earlier. A small side table with a pitcher of water and a plate of the plain butter biscuits Frankie had prepared before midnight. Lily was in the leather chair. The gray wool blanket was drawn up to her shoulders. Mr. Buttons was tucked into the crook of her arm. The folded paper crane sat carefully on the wide leather armrest beside her, not on the floor, not on the table. She had placed it where she could see it. She looked up as Luca entered. No panic, only recognition. Uncle Luca, little Lily. He sat down on the low stool opposite her. Is Uncle Alessandro all right? Luca nodded. He's all right. He's working downstairs. He'll come up in about an hour. Are the bad people gone? Gone. Did anyone get hurt? Luca considered his answer. He chose the truth at the level she needed. Not Uncle Alessandro. Not Uncle Frankie. Not me. Lily nodded once. She accepted the boundary. She looked down at Mr. Buttons and then back up. Uncle Luca. Is Uncle Alessandro going to leave? Luca did not understand the question at first. Leave where, sweetheart? Leave the way my mama did. 2 words. Like my mama. Luca sat still for 3 seconds. Then he answered in the way he knew would be true, because he would personally make sure it was true. No, he is not going to leave. He promised you. Lily nodded once, without hesitation. Because in the 6 weeks since her mother had gone into the 3rd floor linen closet and not come out, the only adult in this estate who had kept every promise he made her was Alessandro. She had already built the small, careful mathematics of that trust, and she was not going to unbuild it for anyone. She laid her head back against the leather, drew Mr. Buttons closer against her chest, and closed her eyes. Luca stayed on the low stool across from her until her breathing had gone even. Then he rose without sound, stepped back through the door, closed it, and turned the lock. Frankie was already lifting the coffee to his lips. Below them, in the wine cellar 3 floors down, Anthony Sabatini had just finished naming the last of the 7 men in Vincent's New York organization. He had also said one other thing, a piece of information about Vincent's Wednesday morning routine that he had not been asked for and had volunteered without prompting. What Sabatini said in that cellar was going to move Alessandro Moretti to a decision he had not planned to make. He was not going to wait until Wednesday's dawn. 4:50 in the morning. Alessandro stepped out of the wine cellar and pulled the heavy door shut behind him. Sabatini had given him 7 names in the New York organization. 2 of them Alessandro had not expected. A mid-level accountant at a Bay Ridge freight company, not a Moretti firm, but one with a long-standing container contract that touched 6 of his own shipments, and a shift foreman at the Newark port who had worked for Alessandro 3 years earlier before quietly moving to a competitor. Both men would be dealt with in the coming week. But no one inside Alessandro's own inner organization had been bought. Not a capo, not a bookkeeper, not a soldier, not a driver. Every man on his side of the harbor was still his. It was the only piece of clean news the night had given him. Sabatini had also given him one further thing, unasked. Vincent's Wednesday morning schedule. Verrazzano Bakery in Bensonhurst, 7 o'clock. Same booth, same double espresso, same 2 men at the door. But Vincent was not going to be at the Verrazzano tomorrow morning. Alessandro's false extraction message had guaranteed that, within the next 24 hours, Vincent would pull back to the Red Hook warehouse, harden his perimeter, and wait. Alessandro had no intention of giving him 24 hours. He found Luca in the corridor outside the security room. Assemble. We move in 40 minutes. Everyone? Everyone except Marco and 3 men here. Frankie holds Lily. Vito stays in the security room on the monitors. The rest come with me. Luca tapped a short message into the encrypted channel on his phone. He did not need to add anything to it. Every capo in the tri-state read those 7 words and understood. Within 35 minutes, 12 black cars had rolled up along the inner drive of the estate. 42 men. Every one of them knew what this was. No one asked. No one needed to. Before he went down to the cars, Alessandro climbed back up to the 2nd floor. Frankie unlocked the panic room and stepped aside. Inside, Lily was asleep in the leather chair, the gray wool blanket drawn to her chin. The folded paper crane still sat on the armrest beside her. Alessandro knelt in front of the chair. He rested his hand very lightly over her small forearm beneath the blanket. Her eyes opened. Uncle Alessandro. I have to go and do something, Lily. Where? To see the man who hurt your mama. She looked at him for a long moment. She did not ask anything else. Then she drew her arm out from under the blanket and lifted Mr. Buttons off her lap. You take him. Alessandro hesitated. Are you sure? You take him. Then you bring him back to me. He did not believe in talismans. He had never believed in them. His father had carried a small silver medallion of St. Michael into every meeting he had ever attended, and the medallion had not stopped 3 bullets through the driver's side glass of a Cadillac at a red light on Roosevelt Avenue. But he took the rabbit, the old stuffed thing with the left ear that had been mended twice, weighing less than 200 grams, soft as an apology under his fingers, and he tucked it into the inside pocket of his black overcoat. I will bring him back to you. She nodded once. He stood. He left the room. He closed the door. Frankie locked it after him. Their eyes met once in the corridor. Nothing was said. Nothing needed to be. Alessandro went down the main staircase. In the inner courtyard, Luca was waiting beside the first black car. Alessandro slid into the rear seat. The door closed with a soft, precise sound. The convoy rolled through the outer gates of the estate at 5:32 in the morning. 12 cars in careful spacing. Headlights low. No bright work. No radio traffic. Above Long Island Sound, the sky was still fully dark, but at the horizon line, The edge of the water had begun to shift from black toward the first pale gray of steel. Alessandro looked out through the window at the passing hedges. He was not thinking in words. He was thinking in images. Rosa at the kitchen window in her gray uniform, holding a chipped enamel cup of coffee she had made for herself and no one else, watching the mist rise off the estate pond in the same slow ropes it was rising in now. In the inside pocket of his overcoat, buttons pressed lightly against his ribs. In the next 2.5 hours, a chapter 70 years old between two families was going to be closed at the Red Hook docks, 6:40 in the morning. The Red Hook docks lay under a low sea mist that had not lifted since the tide turned. Warehouse 23, Vincent DeLuca's principal building, the seventh in a row of identical corrugated structures, was ringed by a 3-meter chain-link fence with 4 small observation towers at its corners. Vincent had ordered the compound sealed at 3:30 in the morning. He had 18 men inside, 3 snipers on the roof, 2 panel trucks parked in the loading bay, both loaded with weapons, ready to roll out if Alessandro dared come. What Vincent did not have was 2 things. 1. He did not have the time it had taken Anthony Sabatini to give up the compound's floor plan, tower assignments, and the location of the North Service Tunnel. 2. He did not know Alessandro was arriving at twice the speed he had estimated. 42 Moretti men split into 3 prongs. Prong 1, 12 men under Luca. They approached from the water 2 silent motor launches across the small inlet, landing at the south pier of the warehouse. Prong 2, 18 men under a capo named Sal Marino. They approached from the land a section of the western fence cut clean and folded back with wire cutters at 6:52. Prong 3, 12 men with Alessandro. They held the northern flank, the old service tunnel that connected Warehouse 23 to Pier Number 4. Sabatini had set it in the wine cellar without being asked. Under pressure, Vincent always runs the north tunnel. That was where Alessandro waited. 6:55. Prongs 1 and 2 hit at the same moment, 2 seconds apart. The DeLuca sniper in the southeast tower dropped in the first 3 seconds. The northwest tower man dropped at 6. Gunfire opened up inside the warehouse. There was breaking glass, breaking wood, one voice shouting a command that did not finish. In 4 minutes, Prong 1 took the southern stairwell. In 6, Prong 2 took the western office block. Vincent, exactly as Sabatini had predicted, broke for the north tunnel with 2 close protection men behind him. The heavy tunnel door was slow to open. He pulled it. His 2 guards followed him through. The door closed with a low iron clang. 300 meters of old concrete corridor. Sparse yellow bulbs strung along the ceiling. Damp air. The distant sound of the firefight above him receding, then muffled, then gone. At the far end, the exit door onto Pier 4. Vincent pushed it. It opened easily. Too easily. He stepped out. Pier 4 was empty. The sea mist was thick. The first gray of dawn was just beginning to lift the outlines of the shipping containers stacked along the length of the pier. At the seaward end of the pier, a single figure stood. Black overcoat, hands empty, no hat. Alessandro Moretti. Vincent understood in half a second. His 2 guards drew their weapons, the reflex of men trained not to think about it. But from behind the stacked shipping containers along both sides of the pier, 8 Moretti soldiers stepped out into the open. 2 coordinated bursts. Both DeLuca guards dropped before either of them completed the motion of raising his sidearm. Vincent did not draw. His pistol remained in the holster inside his coat. He knew there was no version of drawing it that ended with him alive. He stood where he was. Alessandro took 1 step forward on the wet planking, then another. He stopped when 3 meters separated them. He reached into the outer pocket of his overcoat, not his gun. He drew out a thin gold chain. He lifted it into the gray dawn light and let it swing once from his index finger, so that the small oval pendant caught what little light was moving off the water. On the pendant's left edge, the faint hairline scratch was clearly visible. Vincent looked at it. Then he looked at Alessandro. He did not plead. There was no room in his face for that. There was only recognition, the recognition of a man who had understood, at the moment Sabatini had first missed a check-in 3 hours ago, that this pier was where it was going to end. Alessandro spoke in a voice pitched just above the sound of the tide against the pilings. You killed a woman who gave my house 15 years without asking for anything in return. And then you reached for her child. I want you to know that when you go. Vincent nodded once. He drew. Alessandro drew. The exchange lasted less than 2 seconds. Vincent fell first. He did not suffer long. Alessandro walked forward and knelt on one knee beside him. The gold chain had slipped from his fingers when he had fired. He picked it up off the wet planking, wiped the pendant clean on the inside lining of his overcoat, and slipped it into the same inner pocket where Mr. Buttons was already waiting. He turned and walked back up the pier toward the tunnel entrance without hurrying. That chapter was closed. The next one was waiting for him at the estate. 8:30 in the morning. Alessandro walked back through the front doors of the estate in an overcoat that still carried the smell of harbor smoke. He did not stop at the dining room. He did not stop at the library. He walked directly up the main staircase to the second floor and down the corridor to the panic room. Frankie opened the door for him without a word. Inside, Lily was awake. She was sitting in the brown leather chair, eating a small piece of butter biscuit that Frankie had cut into quarters and set on a plate on the side table. She looked up when he entered. She set the biscuit down on the plate. She looked at him. Alessandro knelt in front of the chair. He drew Mr. Buttons from the inside pocket of his overcoat and placed the rabbit gently in her lap. I brought him back. She wrapped both arms around the rabbit and pressed him against her chest. Then she looked up at Alessandro and waited. He drew out the thin gold chain. It had been wiped clean of everything the night had put on it. The oval pendant caught the amber light of the panic room. On its left edge, the faint hairline scratch was still there. It would always be there. "This is yours, Lily. Your mother gave it to you." I brought it back. She held out her small hand. He laid the chain into her palm. She held it a moment. Then she offered it back to him. "Will you put it on me?" He took the chain between his fingers. Two hands that had held a pistol steady on a wet pier 3 hours ago now fumbled with a small gold clasp. The first attempt slipped. The second slipped. On the third, the tiny catch missed the ring entirely. He drew a slow breath. On the fourth try, the clasp closed at the nape of her small neck. She looked down at the pendant resting against her chest. Then she looked up at him. "Okay," she said quietly. That was all. He did not say anything. He did not need to. 4 weeks later, a file of formal adoption papers sat on the desk in the library, signed at every marked line. On the mantelpiece above the fireplace, a new frame, Rosa Mendez in her gray uniform, standing at the kitchen window, photographed 12 years earlier by Frankie's late wife and enlarged from the old album. Beside the frame, a folded white napkin crane, slightly yellowed now, placed there by Lily and permitted to be moved by no one. 6:15 in the morning. Alessandro sat at the desk reading the weekly financial report. Small footsteps at the door. Lily came in with Mr. Buttons in one arm, soft slippers on her feet, her hair still tousled from sleep. She climbed into the chair beside him. She sat down. She did not say anything. He put his arm around her shoulders. Outside the library window, the mist was lifting off the estate pond in slow gray ropes, exactly the way it had lifted on the morning 15 years earlier, when Rosa Mendez had first walked into this house with a small suitcase and no expectations. Sometimes the loudest kind of loyalty is the quietest kind. Rosa Mendez asked for nothing across 15 years, no raise, no thank you, no acknowledgement. And when she was gone, the space she left behind was so large, it changed the shape of an entire empire. The most powerful man in the city learned, too late for her, that real strength is not measured in the fear you cause. It is measured in who you protect after they can no longer protect themselves. And sometimes justice comes in the smallest voice at a doorway, pointing at a stolen truth with one small finger. Who in your life shows up quietly, day after day, without ever being seen? Have you ever told them what they mean to you? Leave their name in the comments. Say the name today, while there is still time. If Rosa's story moved you, hit the like button for her. Subscribe so we can keep telling stories like this one: real love, real loss, real loyalty. Share this video with someone who has spent years giving without ever being thanked. Let it be your thank you. Take care of the quiet ones around you. Take care of yourselves. See you in the next one.